Welcome back to The Explainer. I am genuinely so excited to have you here today because we are diving into something that is just, well, it's as fascinating as it is mysterious. Today, we're unpacking a concept from our source material that is shockingly brief. I mean, we are literally looking at just two words, the Immortals. It is incredibly rare to get a source text this perfectly concise, but as we're going to see, when you strip away all the noise and the excess exposition, you're left with a concept that has essentially driven the entirety of human history. So we're going to take those two words and just unpack the whole universe of meaning packed inside them.
It's the ultimate question, isn't it? What actually makes a concept, a legacy, or a being truly immortal? When you hear that phrase, it triggers something deeply hardwired into our collective consciousness. We aren't just talking about living forever in a physical sense, though, that's definitely part of it. We're talking about ideas that absolutely refuse to fade, works of art that outlive their creators by centuries, legacies that permanently alter the trajectory of civilization. So what gives something the power to transcend time? Okay, let's dive into this.
Over the next 9 minutes or so, we've got a really structured journey mapped out for you. First, defining the Immortals. Second, we'll hit the core themes and insights. And finally, we'll look at the broader impact. Straightforward and right to the point.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, Defining the Immortals. We need to set our baseline here.
To really get what our source text is pointing at, we have to recognize this universal, almost obsessive human fascination with endurance. The definition we're working with goes way beyond just biology. We are defining the Immortals as entities, concepts, or legacies that endure indefinitely. They actively resist the natural decay of time. I mean, think about it. In a universe completely governed by entropy, where literally everything eventually breaks down, fades, or is forgotten, the concept of immortality is the ultimate rebellion, right? It's absolute permanence in a world defined by the temporary.
Let's just take a second to look at the exact phrase from our source excerpt, the Immortals. Just feel the weight of that for a moment. There are no adjectives, there are no long-winded explanations, it doesn't tell us who they are or what they are, and honestly, that is exactly where its power comes from. By leaving the concept completely unadorned, the text basically forces us to project our own deepest understandings of eternity right onto it. The sheer brevity of this source material acts as a brilliant catalyst. When you have a text this unbelievably concise, where no other words are even needed to be written down, it acts almost like a mirror. It forces us to focus entirely on the massive gravitational weight of the concept itself. There's no main character to follow, no complex plot to distract us. We are just left staring face to face with the raw idea of human endurance. It strips away all that background noise and asks us to consider what it actually means to leave a mark that cannot be erased.
And that brings us to a really critical pivot point in this explainer. Because if we live in a finite world, and we are strictly bound by the rigid rules of time and biology, how do we, as a species, even attempt to achieve this endurance? How on earth do we build bridges to eternity when our own lifespans are so incredibly brief?
Which leads us perfectly into Section 2, Core Themes and Insights. Let's look at the actual mechanics of how this works.
You can essentially split the human pursuit of immortality into two distinct camps: biological endurance on one side and cultural legacy on the other. So on the biological side, you have the literal, scientific pursuit of extending the human lifespan. Defeating disease, slowing down aging, physically defying death. But then, on the flip side, you have the historical reality of cultural legacy. Think about Shakespeare, Mozart, or the architects who built the pyramids. They definitely didn't achieve biological immortality, but they are absolutely part of the Immortals because their cultural footprint is fiercely alive today.
When you really unpack the term, it covers a few different facets of human pursuit. First, you've got timelessness, creating something that resonates no matter what era you're in. Second is the defiance of natural limits, just constantly pushing back against what we think is physically or biologically possible. Third is the preservation of ideas, building libraries, digital archives, and institutions to protect knowledge from decaying. And finally, generational impact, that quiet, everyday immortality of passing down our values, our knowledge, and our genes to the next generation.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how it breaks down these pursuits across different human disciplines. Just look at the mechanisms of endurance here. In the domain of biology, our mechanism is genetic legacy, right? We live on through the DNA we pass forward. In history, the mechanism is written records. We literally defeat time by encoding our memories in stone, on paper, and now on servers. And in culture, the mechanism is mythology, the stories and legends we keep telling each other century after century. They are completely different domains, but it is the exact same pursuit.
I really want to pause on this number for a second. 1. Despite all those different domains, biology, history, culture, there is really only one singular unifying goal sitting at the very heart of our source text. One ultimate objective that unites every artist, every scientist, and every historian, and that is the profound desire to defy the erasure of time.
So here's the crucial takeaway from this section. Immortality, when we're talking about human achievement, is not merely about survival. I mean, a rock survives for millions of years, but it isn't immortal in the way we mean it, right? True immortality is the persistence of significance. It means that long after the original creator is gone, the impact, the meaning, and the resonance of what they did continues to shape the world. It is surviving with a real purpose.
Understanding that persistence of significance is the perfect setup for our final section, the broader impact. Let's take this massive abstract concept and apply it to our modern lives.
The journey to joining the ranks of the immortal usually follows a pretty specific, logical progression. Step 1 always starts with acknowledging our own mortality. Honestly, it's the friction of knowing our time is limited that creates the initial spark. Step 2 is our reaction to that realization, pursuing enduring works. This is where the magic happens. Innovation, art, building things that are way larger than ourselves. And step 3 is the end result, achieving conceptual immortality. That's when the work fully detaches from the creator and takes on an eternal life of its own in the public consciousness.
It's fascinating to look at how our interpretation of this concept has shifted over human history. Back around 3000 BCE, immortality was strictly for mythological gods. It was divine, totally unattainable for mortals. Fast forward to our current era, say 2026, and we're looking at digital permanence. We are uploading our thoughts, our voices, and our creations to clouds that could theoretically outlast our physical bodies. And looking ahead to 2100, we are staring down the barrel of actual biological extension. The definition of our source title is just constantly evolving right alongside human and scientific progress.
Now, you might be asking yourself, why does this matter to me on a random Tuesday morning? Well, it matters because the concept of the immortals is literally the hidden engine behind almost all human progress. It's the drive that inspires relentless scientific breakthroughs. It is the core motivation behind artistic creation, that deep desire to make something beautiful that actually lasts. It shapes our cultural values by forcing us to decide what is worth preserving. And maybe most importantly, it encourages long-term thinking. It pushes us to build systems and design societies that will benefit generations we are never going to meet.
And this brilliantly illustrates the genius of our incredibly brief source text. Now that we've unpacked the biology, the history, the cultural mythology, and the psychology behind human legacy, just look at these 2 words one more time: the Immortals. They don't just represent some fantasy, they represent the absolute highest ceiling of human ambition.
You know, the source material we explored today was completely devoid of any excess. And that, in and of itself, is a profound lesson. Because when you strip away all the temporary distractions of daily life, the fleeting trends, the everyday noise, the passing anxieties, what you are left with is the core idea of what truly lasts, what is permanent, what is genuinely significant.
Which brings us to the end of our explainer. And I want to leave you with a question to carry with you long after this presentation is over. Knowing that true endurance is really about the persistence of significance, and knowing that our time is absolutely the most valuable, finite resource we have, what will you build? What will you share? And what will you leave behind to join the ranks of the Immortals? Thank you so much for exploring this with me today, and keep pursuing your legacy.